While the Atlanta Braves farm system might not be the deepest in baseball, they continually churn out top prospects who come up and have a big impact. And we're going to look at some of those prospects today as we look at the top 5 Atlanta Braves prospects heading into 2024. Got Lindsay Crosby joining the show from Locked On MLB Prospects to join the discussion as well and get into these prospects. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you check out my written work over at BravesToday.com. Make sure you follow the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Of over 8,800 subscribers there, trying to get to 10K by opening day. You can help me do that by hitting that thumbs up button on this video. If you're watching on YouTube, you're listening on the audio version, if you would, please leave me a 5-star review. I appreciate all the support you give me here at Locked On Braves. I'm so excited for today's episode. We're going to get into our top 5 Atlanta Braves prospects heading into 2024. So really excited about this conversation. Talk about some of these top prospects in the system, some who could have a big impact at the big league level as soon as 2024. We'll discuss all that on today's episode. Before we do, though, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet that you place. Make sure you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, if you missed it last Monday, I started ranking the top 10 prospects in the Braves system. I gave you prospects 6 through 10. You haven't listened to that, make sure you go back and give it a listen. But today, we're going to go over our top 5. And for those who are new to my top rankings list for prospects, I do it based purely on upside. I'm taking out some of the risks, the injury risk. I'm looking if this guy reaches their top percentile, what could they possibly be? That's how I rank them here. Also, this year, I'm leaving off anyone I haven't been able to see myself on video. These are my rankings based on what I'm seeing with my eyes, certainly using some other evaluators' input as well. But these are what do I see? What am I seeing when I look at these prospects and watch them? So that's how I'm doing these rankings. And I'm really excited to get into my top 5 this year. It's been really fun doing these the last 2 years on Locked On Braves. And so I can't wait to get into this top 5 that I think is really, really exciting. And to help me with that conversation, I'm bringing in Lindsay Crosby, the prospects guru over there from Locked On MLB Prospects. Lindsay, had you on here last year to go over the top 5. Glad to have you back.
Excited to be here. One of my favorite shows because this is my team. So excited to be here. Excited to talk about some of these guys and maybe dive into a little bit finer detail on exactly what it is that they're doing well or what they can do better.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts on these players. Just in case you are new to the show, throughout the offseason, I go back, I watch video on all these prospects, and I give you my take on them. And then at the end of that, once I've watched everybody, then I go and put this list together. So you can go throughout the offseason. You can look at the playlist for Minors Monday, and you'll see all the conversation topic around a lot of these prospects. But glad to have Lindsay on here. He can definitely give some further insight on a lot of these. And Lindsay, like I said at the top, I'm doing this ranking purely based on upside. I know I told you that last year. The only difference this year is, though, I'm leaving off anyone who I haven't been able to see myself. So, Luis Guanipa, Jose Perdomo, who they just signed, probably 2 guys that are going to be in a lot of people's top 10 just based on upside. But I'm waiting till I'm able to see these guys myself, at least on video. And hopefully we see Guanipa at low A this year. Probably be a couple years for Perdomo. But that's how I'm doing these rankings, Lindsay.
Yeah, that's something that I'm in the middle of right now while we're doing the farm system previews is I've just been leaving off those January IFA guys because same thing, I haven't seen them play yet. Nobody's really seen them play in 2 years. So it makes sense. I like that decision actually, and I'm fully on board with that idea.
Good. Well, I'm also going to start today a little bit of review. If you did miss last week's Minors Monday where I went through prospects 6 through 10, today I'm going to get Lindsay's take on some of these. And just to recap At number 10, I have Sabine Ceballos, somebody I'm really excited about from this past draft coming out of Oregon. Just a good bat. David McCabe at number 9, Drake Baldwin at number 8. I said on last week's episode, Lindsay, and I'll just stop there, and I want to get your thought on these 3 guys because I think these 3 guys are a tier. Maybe Ceballos isn't quite ready for this tier yet, but certainly McCabe and Baldwin, and just about every ranking you're going to see, those 2 are back-to-back with each other. But I think these 3 bats in particular, if Ceballos becomes the guy that I think he could be, I think it's a pretty similar type of player, somebody who could be a really solid big league contributor. I don't think we're looking at all-star level potential for any of these guys, but I think all of them, have a little bit of power to the game, have a little bit of average. I think they all can do similar things. Obviously, McCabe, you're hoping there's a good bit more power than these other 2, but I really do like all 3 of these hitters, and we're starting to see some bats come up in this Braves system.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've had multiple hitters. Obviously, you had Vaughn Grissom. Obviously, you had Michael Harris. But it feels like this is what you were missing. These infield types that could play multiple positions, whether it's McCabe playing catcher or first base. Baldwin playing catcher, first base. McCabe on the corners, although I think he's probably more of a first baseman than a third baseman. And then I am really curious to see what Ceballos does this year. Obviously, he won a Rawlings Gold Glove at third base in college. I've been talking to folks both inside the organization and closer to him that he's going to try some shortstop this year. The Braves want to see, can he kick out to shortstop and give them another option in the system, because there's just not a lot of shortstop depth for Atlanta. And obviously, Perdomo is probably your highest ceiling shortstop, and he's 17 years old. So I'm curious to see what these guys do this year. And I think if they have good years, that could really impact some of the contractual decisions at the end of the season you have on guys like a Travis d'Arnaud, like a Marcell Ozuna, guys like that.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. We've talked about it on here several times. The depth at the shortstop position in this Braves system, there's just not a lot there. I mean, we'll talk about Alvarez here in a second, but there's certainly giving him every opportunity to stick at shortstop, even though I have my questions about that. And I was somewhat surprised to hear you say, before we even started recording, about them wanting to try Ceballos out there at shortstop. He looks like a third baseman to me. Both of those guys do, but I think it just speaks to the fact that the Braves are unsure what's going to be the future at shortstop at the big league level. And they're going to give these guys every opportunity to prove that they can't handle the position. Kind of similar to Vaughn Grissom in many ways. I mean, they gave Vaughn Grissom every chance that they could to see if he could handle that shortstop position. And ultimately, they didn't feel like that was the case. But it is very interesting that both Ceballos and Alvarez, it looks like they're going to be pushing them at shortstop. Now, going to number 7, Owen Murphy. He's somebody for me. I mean, this is no disrespect. I said it when I talked about him last week. He's just not a pitcher that I watch. He doesn't blow me away, but he's got good command. He does have some good pitches. And I think of the guys kind of in this group, and I think Drew Hackenberg, Cade Keeler, who they just drafted, are probably 2 pitchers behind him. Even Darius Vines, who still qualifies as a prospect. Murphy is the one that I think has the safest floor, to reach that, fourth type starter. Maybe he has the ceiling as a number 3. It's just not an exciting profile for me for Owen Murphy, but I do think out of kind of that group of pitchers that you would put at the back half of the top 10 or maybe in the top 15, he's to me the one that I think does probably have the higher ceiling of that group, and also probably the safest bet to reach his floor.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what it is for Murphy is his ceiling requires significant projection. Like, he's listed at 6'1", 190. He does not look to be 6'1" or 190. And so you look at, it's a low 90s fastball. You look, it's an upper 70s curveball, and you can see like there's room on the frame to add some velocity, but it's all projection. And the floor, just what you have now, that fastball, curveball, slider, and then what there is of a changeup that's pretty raw. Like, if those pitches continue to develop like a typical 20-year-old pitcher's pitches will develop, you can see how he easily hits that floor. And I think that's kind of why he's in that tier, at least for me, is is the stuff he has now is good, but you can see if things break right, if the physical development breaks right, the velocity comes in, you could see how he could go from a number 5, number 4 to maybe a number 3 type guy. So it makes sense to have him at number 7, kind of behind that group of big 5 pitchers in the system. But I do agree that he probably has the safest floor simply because the fastball, while the velocity is not great, it does play really well up in the zone.
Yeah, it really does. It's surprising when I watched him. And like I said, it doesn't look like anything exciting, but you just see hitters taking, whiff after whiff against that fastball that, again, doesn't have big velocity, but certainly gets on hitters. And then at number 6, my guy Ignacio Nacho Alvarez, who I've loved, for a while. I have him just a step ahead of those other hitters that I mentioned. And for me, a couple of things with Ignacio. Can he stick at shortstop? Again, I have my doubts about that, but me and you both know and heard people in the system that they like him at shortstop and they think he's really good there defensively. And I hope that's the case. I just have my doubts about that. And then the other question with Ignacio is does the power come? Right now it's probably a 10 to 15 home run bat. Can he turn into a 20 home run bat along with what we figure to be a really good hit tool, high on base percentage type of guy? Can he, develop into some more power?
Yeah, and I think the reason for me that I have him higher than everybody else is the contact's really good. Like his contact rate's in the 80%, and it's a step ahead of where McCabe is, where Baldwin is, where we think Ceballos is going to be. But I'm with you. He's in that weird scenario, and I think part of the reason Atlanta's let him continue to run at shortstop, and same thing with Ceballos, is neither one of those guys really has the power to profile at third base. And so you're in that weird tweeners moment of he either needs to figure out the power for third or figure out the defense for short. And let him try one or the other. Let's see if either one of them come in, knowing that if both of those come in, you have a guy who's going to be a really great contributor for you. I still think Ignacio in his best form could be a defensively fringe to average shortstop who could bat in the high 2s and probably give you, 10-10 or 15-15. I think that's probably the ceiling for Ignacio Alvarez, but you're going to give him every possible chance to get there simply because there's nobody else you're really blocking at the moment.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely excited to see what he can do, especially, he gets to jump up to Double-A. That's, in my mind, the biggest test for prospects, trying to make that jump up to Double-A. So we'll see that in 2024. I'm really excited to see what he can do. Obviously, what the top 5 is. We went through 6 through 10, not without giving too much away. Anybody outside of that you think I missed that maybe you would have had in the top 10?
I heard some of your just missed list, your Cade Kuehler, your Drew Hackenberg. I'm curious about some of those pitchers. We've talked on the show before, Garrett Bowman. Feel like he's the kind of guy who can take a leap. And then I am curious what happens when Blake Burkhalter makes it back, simply because he was a relief arm that was very polished. He had been picking up velocity really well. And so I'm curious about those guys. I don't quite think any of them break into the top 10, but I think those were good calls to have them in your just miss there simply because you like a lot of the tools. You just need to see them on the mound because they have such little time in professional baseball.
Yeah, I really do like Bauman, but I think he threw 2 innings this past year, so just didn't have enough to go off of. But big kid, obviously, some big stuff. Looking forward to see what he can do this year in his first full season of professional baseball. All right, next we will start to get into that top 5, going with numbers 3, 4, and 5. We'll discuss those here and next. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is always what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash, which we like around here, Lindsay. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I want to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Lindsay, let's jump into the top 5, starting at number 5, and somebody that really starting to rise up the ranks, especially for those who are following the Braves very closely. But even on a national scale, I feel like Giancarlo Lara is starting to get a lot of noise after a really big year that he had in 2023, especially the second half of that, 114 strikeouts and 81 in a third innings, cut down on his walks as well in the second half. Just really good stuff. I'll let you get into more of the specifics, but really good, fastball can get to the upper 80s. The slider to me looked like a really just elite pitch. And that combination right there, that fastball slider, you're going to see a lot in the Braves system right now. For me, the question with him is obviously young kid. Can he develop that third pitch? And we say that a lot with some of these kids. Unless you're Spencer Strider, you're going to need that third pitch. And that's just the one thing that I watched with him. I saw him struggle against lefties some. I think, he needs a changeup or something else to help him against lefties. But this is a kid I'm super excited about to see what he can do. Young kid, again, kind of snuck up on a lot of people this year. But I think it's a very high ceiling. And again, with that fastball slider combo that he has, I think it gives him a pretty safe floor as well.
Yeah, those last 3 starts for Augusta, it was Salem, Fredericksburg, and Charleston. He had something like 17 innings. He struck out 26 batters. He walked only 4 and gave up no runs that entire stretch. And the big thing for me, you kind of touched on, he's really dominant fastball slider. That fastball, great velocity on it. And then the slider can, high 80s. Really kind of like sharp late break. It's not a sweeper or anything like that. But the big difference when I went back and I watched some of those, the Salem, the Fredericksburg, the Charleston outings, is it felt like when he would incorporate the changeup a little bit more. He doesn't have to throw it a ton, but when you're throwing it, 5% of the time, I feel like, one, you don't have enough comfort with it for it to be effective and to actually land it for strikes. And when he threw it a little bit more and incorporated it from the beginning, it felt like he had a little better command of it. And to me, that's the big thing. You touched on Spencer Strider. I think Braves fans are a little bit spoiled. It's 2 pitches is not sustainable for any starting pitcher besides Spencer Strider. It works for him because they're both among the best of those types of pitches in all of baseball. And the big thing here is going to be that changeup. I also wouldn't mind seeing, I wonder if he's a candidate to get a curveball. The Braves like to have these guys do a lot of vertical work, right? You elevate the fastball, you bring the curveball down. I want to see if maybe they give him a curveball so he has different options as far as velocity bands as well as directions. I wonder if something like that would work, but I agree with you. He does need to get that changeup more consistent and be able to land it. And when he uses it more, it feels like he does better with it as the outing goes on.
Yeah, no, I think he definitely, needs that third pitch, whatever it may be, change up, curveball, just help him out a little bit. But like I said, with those 2 pitches, I mean, the fastball and slider, I think it gives him a pretty safe floor. Even if he doesn't make it as a starter, I think he could be a high leverage reliever with those 2 pitches. And that's needed. I mean, you need those guys to come up. That's not a fail in my mind as a prospect if you can, find a high leverage reliever like that with good stuff. So can't wait to see what he does in 2024, coming off a breakout season in 2023. Speaking of somebody else who kind of broke out in 2023, as we finally got to see him, and that's Spencer Schwellenbach, who I have at number 4. And I don't know if I'm seeing something that other people aren't. I've seen a lot of people fade Spencer Schwellenbach in their rankings this year. I've seen him, top 15, but in that 10 to 15 range. I was blown away when I watched Spencer Schwellenbach this offseason and watched the tape on him. I think a lot of people see the lack of strikeouts and maybe that, has them shy away a little bit. I honestly don't know why he's not getting more strikeouts. His stuff is really, really good. I mean, fastball in the mid to upper 90s. Got some arm side run on it as well. Almost like he was throwing a two-seamer or a sinker. I thought it had a lot of good run on it. A slider, a very impressive secondary as well. Throws a changeup and a curveball. I think the only question I have is, can they get him stretched out? Obviously, coming off the Tommy John surgery after they drafted him, this is his first season back. But I'm really excited about the future of Spencer Schwellenbach. Again, the only question I have is getting him stretched out. Can he maintain that velocity deep into games? That's the only other thing I really saw with him, is sometimes that velocity would drop off pretty quickly. But again, it's a guy coming off TJ. That's certainly to be expected. But I love Spencer Schwellenbach. I'm very excited about him.
Yeah, the fastball changeup, I feel like that combo is really good. That curveball, he throws a cutter sometimes, which is fun. I think some of the issue with Spencer Schwellenbach when it comes to evaluation is, depending on which outing you catch him, sometimes the breaking balls aren't super consistent. And then from a pure like metric standpoint, he doesn't get a ton of the life of the fastball up in the zone as far as the induced vertical break. And like you said, he's got some arm side run on it. And so it's not like a bad shape or anything, but so many people are kind of caught up in, oh, you have to have 17 inches of induced vertical break. Like they're talking about Paul Skeens' fastball was bad because it doesn't have 17 inches of induced vertical break. And it's like, no, it's a really good fastball. I think Schwellenbach's kind of in the same boat. When you just look at the characteristics of it, you think it's not that great. But like you said, it moves really well and it's effective. I think that kind of comes back to the strikeouts as well. I wonder if maybe he's using it incorrectly. Given all of the arm side run that it has, rather than trying to elevate it, maybe that's something where you play it down a bit, since most of what he's doing, he has the changeup and he has the curveball. I wonder if maybe tweaking what he does a little bit would help the strikeouts, if that's something, that's a direction you want to go in. But either way, I was amazed how good his command was coming off of Tommy John. Had like a 6% strikeout rate, which is absurd for a guy that's that fresh off of the procedure.
Yeah, no, that was certainly one thing to look at. Obviously, anybody coming off TJ, what does that command look like? But yeah, certainly was impressed with the command that he had. A 207 average against, a 0.98 whip. I mean, I know the strikeouts weren't there, but I mean, you got to look at the results a little bit too. I mean, he was outstanding. And again, I wasn't sure what to expect from him when I went in to watch video, and I was blown away by the stuff that he had. And I just think he's a really, I mean, it's a number 3 starter as his ceiling. I still think I shouldn't say his ceiling. I think maybe he could get up to a number 2, but I think he is more likely to get to that number 3 starter type of role than an Owen Murphy. I just think the stuff is that good. Another pitcher I was blown away by, and I thought about not putting him here because of the injury, but J.R. Ritchie. I mean, I hate that he got injured because he was off to a great start. And again, he and Schwellenbach, when I watched video on these two this past offseason, or is still in the offseason, I was really impressed with the stuff that they had. Fastball for Ritchie, low to mid 90s, nothing overpowering, but he locates it really, really well. And of course, I kind of already alluded to it. He's going to have Tommy John surgery, so likely don't see him till maybe late 2024 as he works his way back. That slider, curveball that he throws as well, both really good secondary pitches, and, a devastating changeup with really good fade on it that he throws against lefties. So I think you're looking at, really good fastball, a couple of really good breaking balls, and a solid, if not plus changeup as well. I really love what I saw from J.R. Ritchie. Now you just got to hope he comes back from Tommy John surgery and kind of pick up where he left off.
Yeah, and talking to some folks, he's been throwing and he's looked pretty decent from what I've heard. I haven't actually seen him throw myself, but from people I've talked to, he's looked pretty good so far in some of the mound work that he's doing. I was surprised seeing a prepster with a really good changeup. Feels like it's not something you get every day, and how polished the changeup was. And then I really liked the movement on the slider, getting that kind of 2-plane break, sitting right there in the mid 80s. It's a really interesting package. I understand having him in this top 3 simply because before the injury, all of the stuff was really, really good. Like you said, the question is, how does it come back? And I'm not going to say thankfully, but I would rather have to have a question about how a guy's stuff comes back from Tommy John surgery than I would from something like a shoulder injury. Yeah. Because Tommy John, at this point, we've done so many of them that we have a better idea of how to get you back versus something like a shoulder tear or a capsule tear that has an odd recovery. So I'm confident that the Braves surgeon, Kevin Meister, and the team, they know how to handle this. They're going to get him back on the mound, and he should be able to, I would assume probably July or August, given the timing of when he had the surgery, get back on a mound, get back into competition. I want to see what the changeup looks like. That's always a tough thing for guys coming back from Tommy John. And then where is the velocity when he first gets back?
Yeah, certainly will be something to watch. You hate to have it, but if you get the injury at the beginning of the year like you did, at least gives you a hope to come back, midpoint of the next year and then roll into the season after that and hopefully be ready to go. And with the Tommy John surgeries now, it's almost like, okay, he's had his, it's almost it makes you almost, I don't want to say feels better about it, but he already had his Tommy John surgery. So hopefully you get it out of the way and can put that behind you. But love JR Ritchie. Hopefully he does get back, sometime mid-season, maybe late in the season, get some innings under his belt. He and both Murphy, when drafted, even as high schoolers, with the command that they had, you felt like these were two guys that could move pretty quickly. So you hope, this doesn't set Ritchie back too far, because I do love the arm and I love the stuff and can't wait to see him get back out there. Speaking of guys getting back out there and hopefully helping at the big league level, next we're going to get into our top two prospects, AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrip. We'll discuss them next. Want to remind you one more time that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Lindsay, we've gotten here. It's the top two. It's no surprise. There's definitely a tier here, and then I think there's a tier with the next three guys that I mentioned, and then another tier kind of after that with Alvarez, Murphy, and other hitters we've mentioned. Well, this is certainly the top tier when you look at the Braves prospects and AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrip. I have Waldrip 1 and Smith-Shawver 2. I think you can go pretty much either way. I think consensus is starting to come around to the fact that Waldrip is a little bit ahead of AJ Smith-Shawver. Maybe it's just kind of the newness factor. Waldrip's the new hyped prospect, just got drafted, had a great debut. But I do just feel like he has that plus pitch in that splitter that he can command. And that's one thing I wanted to see when I went back and watched the pro outings. Me and you both obviously watch a lot of college baseball as well, so saw him a lot there. But the one thing I want to see in his pro outings is, can he locate that splitter in the strike zone? I think that's the big key. In college, you can throw it out of the zone. You're going to get swings and misses all day, except for in the College World Series where LSU hitters were just taking it. But that is the key for me with Waldrip. Can he throw that splitter for strikes? But the reason I put him ahead of AJ Smith-Shawver, I just think the stuff's a little bit more polished right now. And it should be. He's older. He's a college pitcher. It should be a little bit more polished than AJ Smith-Shawver, who really didn't even take up pitching until a couple of years ago. So that's why I put Waldrip ahead of him, because of the plus splitter that he has, that I think is the best pitch among these two guys. And I just think he's a little bit more polished at this point. But I think both guys still have number two potential in them.
Yeah, I think both of these guys could be, your front of the rotation behind Spencer Strider guys if everything breaks right. And to the point of how inexperienced AJ Smith-Shawver is, I asked Alex Anthopoulos at the winter meetings about his expectations for them, and he pointed out AJ Smith-Shawver would be going into his junior year of college. And so he's just very, very young. And the fact that he was able to come up and do what he did, it just testament to his athleticism, his natural athleticism. He's a great athlete. And then the tools that he have. But Waldrip is more advanced, both with the individual pitches and then understanding the sequencing, understanding, the workload and the work required to be a major league pitcher. I think Waldrip 1, Smith-Shawver 2 makes sense, but the difference is very small, right? It's like you said, it's a tier above everybody else. And for Smith-Shawver, it's all predicated for him. The fastball is really, really good. He brought the curveball back, so the slider, the curveball. His whole thing is the command needs to get a little bit better. And I think for him specifically, he needs to be able to show that he can land those pitches in the strike zone and then start taking them out of the zone and have guys chase them. I think some of when you watched him last year, a lot of his scatter plots, his maps, pitches are kind of all over the place. The stuff's good, but he doesn't always know exactly where it's going to go. And so that's one of the big changes for Smith-Shawver. And then Waldrip is just, it's the stuff's really good. He needs just more professional reps. And then you have to bring the walks down. You have to, at a certain point, you have to be able to show that you can, like you said, land the splitter in the zone so that they're watching for it and they can't just sit and let it go by. So work to do for both of them. I do think both of them can be very, very good. And I agree, Waldrip's probably ahead of Smith-Shawver right now just based on the experience.
Yeah, no, and again, I want to reiterate, he is older. He's a college pitcher, a lot of experience. He should be ahead of AJ Smith-Shawver. This is no knock on him. I think you're spot on, though. The one thing for AJ Smith-Shawver just is the command. I mean, like you said, sometimes you didn't know where a pitch was going, and I think that also kind of speaks to the fact of how good that stuff is, because he still got outs and he still had good performances at the big league level, and there was almost no command of his pitches. It was almost kind of effectively wild, but it's also just because the stuff is that good that, he threw 4 no-hit innings against the Cubs late in the year, I believe it was. So, it's really, really good stuff. It's just the kid doesn't have a lot of innings under his belt. He just needs more experience and he needs to gain better control of those pitches. And I think, his ceiling can be as high as it can be with both of these guys, really. So cannot wait to see them. Your prediction right now, who pitches more innings for the Braves in 2024, Waldrip or Shawver?
Probably Waldrip, simply because if you look at his workload versus Smith-Shawver's workload, Waldrip threw, I want to say 130 innings combined between college and the pros last year, and that's more than Smith-Shawver, significantly more than Smith-Shawver threw. And so from a workload perspective, Waldrip makes sense as a guy. They're going to have him at spring training. We already know that. I feel like he's going to have more innings in the majors. Smith-Shawver may pitch more overall, but some of that may be in Gwinnett. Yeah,
and we may see him in the bullpen a little bit too, if they want to try to kind of manage his innings that way. Again, still a young pitcher and doesn't have a lot of experience under his belt. Like you said, with Waldrip, over 130 innings pitched last year. He's somebody you wouldn't be surprised if you saw him pitch 150 innings this year, both at minor league level and the major league level. And so excited to see what both of them can do. And hopefully they're going to have a big impact in the Braves. The Braves need it. We've talked about it on here before. They need some help in that rotation after 2024. Don't know what the future holds with Max Fried or Charlie Morton either. You got Chris Sale to kind of help bridge that gap. But behind Spencer Strider, there's certainly some question marks going forward. Braves have held on to these two guys. A lot of people thought at least one of them might be traded this offseason to get a starting pitcher, but the Braves decided to hold on to both of them. And I think that's because they think they're a big part of this future in the rotation, and certainly hope that is the case. Lindsay, thanks so much for joining me. Let me know, or let the people know, rather, where they can find your work.
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can get all of the baseball writing, BravesToday.com. You can get the podcast, Locked on MLB Prospects, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining me. It's a lot of fun. As always, we'll definitely do it again next year, but we'll have you on again talking at Braves prospects. Always love talking about the future here of the Braves. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Leave me a 5-star review if you would. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast, really do appreciate it. Follow us on social media at @LockedOn_Braves and at ShortstopBall, and we will talk to you next time.